Okay, we are good to go. So we're going to start today with the boring stuff. We're going to start with how to include the source that you're required to have in your proposal, how to properly document that within your proposal. I feel like it's actually a very simple process. I know a lot of people get frustrated with all the little rules about commas and periods and italicizing and things like that, but for our purposes for Unit 2, I want you just to focus on these guidelines, and as long as you are in line with what I show you here, then you're going to be good in terms of points for this aspect of the proposal. So you want to look for 5 key items, and if you can get all 5 of these, that's great. If you can't, I'm going to show you how to work around it. So the author name, the title of the article, the date of publication, the publisher, company, entity, or organization that is behind the article, and then the URL. So before we move forward with the examples, I want to address a couple things. The author name, of course, if you have more than one, you would list the last names of all of the authors. If you have more than 3, there's some different rules for that. If you are one of those people who's got an article with 10 different authors, just email me. I'm not going to cover that detail in this meeting. I don't think those are the kind of sources you guys are going to use anyway. The reason on number 3 that I have ND after date of publication is because sometimes you can't find a date of publication. However, 9 times out of 10, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page that you're looking at, there's going to be at least a year there. It's going to say, updated 2018 or copyright 2018, something like that. That works as your date. It's okay if you don't have a month and a day. It's better than nothing. So if you always check down at the bottom of the website, you will more than likely find that date there, and then that's what you would use. The publisher, company, entity, organization, this can be really relevant with anything related to healthcare or medicine, things like that, because the CDC publishes a lot of information that students like to use, the American Association of Physicians, the AAP. So if you're taking information from one of those big governmental organizations or just a large entity, like as you'll see in the example, Forbes magazine, that is what number 4 is referring to. And then number 5, the URL, of course, the web address. So let's look at the examples. Example 1 has found all 5 pieces of the key information. And this is just an article that I made up. So we've got the name, the article name, the date, the entity of the publishing entity, and then the URL. So for an in-text citation, it's very simple. You'll include the last name and the date only, separated by a comma. So in the 2 examples right here, teaching students online is different than teaching on campus. And then you see the in-text citation, Fisher, comma, 2019, period. Notice where the period is. The period is at the very end of the citation. A lot of times people want to put the period here instead, or they want to put the period here instead, or they want to have like 3 periods, so they just cover all the bases. So no, no, and no. 1 period at the very end of the citation. The citation is part of the sentence. That's why the period goes at the end. Another example is, according to Fisher, 2019, teaching students online is different than teaching on campus. If you notice in my parenthesis, I've only got the year, and that's because I said the name in the sentence. So if you are using the name within the sentence, you don't have to restate it within the citation. You don't need to do anything that's already obvious. So keep that in mind. A lot of us like to word things like according to this or according to that. So it's important then not to duplicate information. The corresponding reference page entry, if you have all 5 pieces of key information, then looks like this. So this is the template that you could follow. Last name, comma, first initial only, followed by the date, followed by, oops, we need a space, followed by the actual article name. Notice that in the article name, none of the words are capitalized except for the first word. Even though in the actual article name, all of the words are capitalized, we don't capitalize on the reference page. So then that is followed by the organization or publishing entity, and then retrieved from our URL. Very simple. Example number 2, because I see this one a lot. So this is where we can't find the author's name. There simply isn't an author. It just appears that it was published by Forbes or by the CDC or by the Huffington Post, whatever it may be. There's no author name. That's okay. You can still work with that. The way that it changes the in-text citation is that the article name replaces the author name. So you're going to use the first few words of the title, not the entire title, the first 3 to 4 words, and the date only. All the same rules apply that did in example 1. We've got the same quote, and then following the quote, teaching students online is taking the place of the author's name, comma, date, period at the end. If we include the name of the article in the sentence, so according to the article, teaching students online one class at a time, we follow that with the date, and then we have the quote. We don't need to include anything but the date here in the citation. Then the corresponding reference page entry does the same thing. It replaces the author's name with the title. Here we have the full title with only the first word capitalized, followed by the date, followed by the publishing entity, followed by retrieved from the website. Pretty simple. So example number 3, and I see this one too. Something important to note is that as you start being unable to find the 5 key pieces of information, the credibility of your website is going down, or the credibility of your source is going down. The strongest sources have author names. It's not that you can't use them if they don't have an author name, but the strongest sources will have them. So keep that in mind. So what if you have the source and it doesn't have an author name? It also doesn't even have a title. And this happens a lot on the CDC pages and other types of government entities. That still could be okay. In that case, rather than using the author's name, you will use the publishing entity as the author's name. So you can see the pattern here. Author's name is ideal. Article title replaces the author's name if there is none. And if there's neither the author's name nor the article title, then the entity replaces the author's name. So exact same example. The in-text citation would include Forbes magazine, 2019. Following the quote, we would see Forbes magazine 2019 with our period at the end. And then according to Forbes magazine with the date in parentheses, and then our quote. Reference page entry, very short, very simple, because we don't have very much information, just Forbes magazine, date, and retrieved from. That's it. So these are the 3 iterations that I imagine 95% of you will need to work with in order to correctly cite your sources in your Unit 2 proposal. So I'm going to go ahead and post this Word document in the Unit 2 folder for reference so that you can go back and use the templates and remind yourself of exactly which version you should be working with, depending on how much information you have. If you do have a question, you can always email me. Say, this is the link to my source. I am not sure how to work with it. I don't know what I'm doing with it. That's fine. I don't mind if you are honest about that. I will tell you exactly how to do it. That's what I'm here for. Okay, so as promised, that was pretty painless and pretty quick, I think. We're going to go ahead and move on to looking at the sample, which is right underneath where I can't get to. Okay, so this is a sample that's posted in the Unit 2 Produce folder, and we're not going to read through the whole thing, but I wanted to just address the structure and the formatting and the organization that's happening here. So remember, you are writing to a specific entity. In this case, the student is proposing an app to help parties keep track of the different people that they're with. So if I bring my family and my sister's family, we can all have this app and keep tabs on where everybody's at. So this student wrote to the Walt Disney Company and to the Department of Product Research and Development. That works as the reader. The reader would not be all of the people who choose to go to Walt Disney. A lot of you guys on your topic approval kind of used the target audience for the app as who you thought your reader might be, but that's not how you want to frame your proposal. It needs to be written to the person or the department or the entity that could actually approve your app being developed. Give yourself a title. Remember, you're framing this as though you work for the company that you're pitching the app to. So the student said Public Relations Marketing Manager, worked very well. Simple subject line. The purpose section, you're going to notice, is pretty short. It's pretty to the point. I'm just going to cover this beginning paragraph. So he wrote, theme park attendance is rising in our parks. In the last quarter of 2017, we saw a 6% increase in attendance at our U.S. domestic parks alone. This success is expected to continue through 2018 with each quarter. And our in-text citation. We must prepare our parks to handle the problems that arise with increased attendance. If the number of attendees rises, then the number of missing persons cases will also rise with it. So they started out with a pretty clear purpose statement. We must prepare our parks to handle the problems that arise with increased attendance. So it's a broad purpose statement. They're not specifically talking about the app yet, and that's okay. You don't want your purpose to give everything away. You just want to make sure that the reader knows what's going to follow. So then the second paragraph goes into a little bit more detail, kind of moves from that broad statement about problems with increased attendance into safety and security of our attractions. Moving down, we have the problem statement. There's an example, children wander off, people get separated. What can happen if people get separated or if children wander into dangerous areas? And then there's a noteworthy example. So this is another bit of research that the student included, and that ends the problem section. Then the solution is pretty detailed. So what I really want to call your attention to here is the use of both the heading solution and then all the subheadings. So here's the summary of the solution, and now it gets broken down. How the app works. So this is a subheading. How the app solves the problem. It's another subheading down here. Look at this nice one-line paragraph right there. This app allows for multiple solutions to this problem. So there's a lot of focus and emphasis on that one sentence because it's a paragraph in and of itself. If you read through this, you're going to notice that one of the strengths is that scenarios and examples are given that pair up with previous mentioned examples and scenarios. So there is a lot of, sorry guys. So there's a lot of consistency and theme happening, and we talked about that in the persuasive PowerPoint techniques, or the persuasive writing techniques. It's good to keep reminding your reader of those worst case scenarios and then bring them back up when you talk about how the app can solve the problem. Keeps the reader on track. And then another subheading, development and deployment requirements. Another subheading, additional benefits. So this solution is about a page and a half long. Instead of just being paragraph after paragraph after paragraph, it's divided up by these nice little subheadings. How the app works, how the app solves the problem, development and deployment requirements, and then finally additional benefits. So this is organized really well. It's really easy to find information. It's really easy to get through from start to finish, or I can just jump to whatever part I'm most interested in. So I would like to see similar organization, similar usage of the subheadings and short paragraphs, things like that, in everybody's app proposals. Again, you can find this example in the Unit 2 Produce folder. So now on to PowerPoints. And we start with, what is the purpose of a PowerPoint? This is largely misunderstood by most students and most people, and even teachers, to be honest with you. A lot of A lot of times the PowerPoints that I see are just lots of bullet points, and then the speaker pretty much reads those bullet points and maybe elaborates a little bit. That is not the purpose of a PowerPoint, and that's not a good PowerPoint. So a good PowerPoint is going to support the speaker. It's the backdrop. It's something happening in the background, but the speaker is still the focus of the presentation. The PowerPoint should visually engage the audience, maybe even entertain them to some extent. And it can also, of course, be used to visually explain content. So using bullet points that you repeat verbally is not visually explaining. Using an image or a graph or even an animation to help support and explain something that you're verbally saying, that is the purpose of a PowerPoint. So buried slide layout, we have a yes for that. I'm going to show you exactly what I mean by that. Slide after slide of bullet points or images in the same location, that's a no. So if you take a look on the left-hand side of my screen over here, where we can see the whole list of all 22 slides in this PowerPoint, I'm going to go up to the beginning, and you will notice at a glance that these PowerPoint slides are different from one another, right? The backgrounds are different, the layouts are different, the placement of images is different. I've got some slides that just simply have one line, others do have a little bit more information. Here I've got visuals on the left and the right. Now I've got a box on the left, a visual on the right, a centered visual, a half screen visual, a visual on the right, visual on the right, and then I break my own rules with lots of words, but that's because I'm teaching, not really presenting. So I get to break that rule. It's important for you guys to have some of the actual text so that you can go back and refer to the PowerPoint. However, what you will see I don't have is slide after slide that is formatted exactly the same with a square-shaped image simply dropped onto the lower right quadrant or the lower left quadrant again and again. And that's what I usually see. Just the slide after slide is exactly the same. There's no variation. There's nothing interesting. I wouldn't even necessarily know that the slide has changed because it looks just like the slide before it. So we want to avoid that. And then you can see the last point on this slide is yes to 1 to 5 short bullet points and no to more than 5 bullet points and bullet points that are longer than one line, like this one. So you guys want to avoid that like the plague. It would be better, the slide itself would look better if I deleted that, even. And then if I dropped in an image over here on this side, there would be a lot more visual appeal to the slide. So taking a look at our example presentation that is also in the Unit 2 Produce folder, this goes along with the app proposal, the written one that we were looking at for Disney. And you can see, just looking at the lineup again on the left-hand side, that we have a lot of variation, a lot of visual interest. Varied placement of the visuals, not a whole lot of bullet points. In fact, only one slide at all that has no visuals on it. So everything else is very visually engaging. Something else to call your attention to is the notes section down here at the bottom underneath where the actual slide is. Since you won't be actually presenting this PowerPoint in class, you'll need to fill in the notes section with your literal speech. So exactly what you would say if you were going to present this in class or to your reader, more ideally. You're not just going to copy and paste your app proposal paragraphs into here because we don't speak the same way that we write. Can you use some of that content? Can you copy paste it and then revise it so that it sounds normal for speaking purposes? Sure, that's totally fine with me. But don't just copy it over. That will hurt your score. So you'll be able to see if we switch back, it's this particular slide is similar to what the student said in the report, but it's not exactly the same. And we can see that right here at the end. This idea should not be overlooked when discussing our parks. One of the greatest fears of parks like Disney is children going missing or getting hurt. If we look here, we don't see one of the greatest fears, so forth and so on, is children getting hurt, right? So we see that this is similar to what we have down here in the notes section, but it's not identical. So take the important ideas that go along with the slide and use those, but type them out in a way that makes sense for speaking purposes. So when I'm reviewing these and grading these, I know what you would say while that slide was up behind you. I have a tip for everybody. If you have access to the latest version of Microsoft PowerPoint, and you should, because you should be able to get the free Office 365 download from Purdue, then you have access to a really cool feature, which is the design feature, which is how this student and many other students and myself create pretty cool looking PowerPoints with absolutely minimal effort. So the way it works is that you would go ahead and type, let's use this slide as an example. You would go ahead and type out all of your content onto the slide, and then you would go up to the top and click this button right here, design. And then you go all the way to the end. And if you have the latest version, you'll see design ideas. If you don't, this will just be empty. It will be sad and blank. So hopefully you can have access to this one. When you click design ideas, PowerPoint comes up with, sorry, no ideas for this slide. That's upsetting. Let's try this one. No ideas for this slide. Let's go back to my PowerPoint and try that. 9 times out of 10, this works like very smoothly. So I'll ask for some ideas, and PowerPoint provides me with a ton of different ideas on how to make this really boring slide that's just text with a black background something prettier. So assignment requirements. Click. Hey, this looks cool. This looks like I knew what I was doing and I had a good eye for visual engagement with my viewer. If I'm not so sure about this one, I can check out. I don't know why there's a bed here for single spaced. So PowerPoint isn't all that smart. But most of the time, their different iterations for designs are really great. And that's how you can avoid having really boring looking PowerPoint slides and look like you have some type of amazing professional talent. So again, all you would have to do is type your plain contents onto the slide, go up to design, and then go to design ideas. And you'll be able to choose. And you can go back in and rework things. So if you find one that you like, but you want to say maybe get rid of this weird guy sleeping in his bed, I can delete that. And then I could add in a new image here if I wanted. So, oh, look, and I did that. Now it gave me even more options. That one's pretty cool. So hopefully that's helpful for you guys. I hope, like I said, that you guys have access to it. And if you're having trouble downloading the Office 365, you can shoot me an email. I can try to help you with that. So that concludes the content that I wanted to present to you guys. I'm going to switch back over into the meeting and answer any questions you have. The assignment is due on Sunday. So keep in mind that you can shoot me over a draft to review of either the PowerPoint or the written proposal. You can do that via email, or you can upload it into the Blackboard course. And Alicia asked, do we have to add bullet points for one slide, or is it not necessary? Nope, you can have an entire PowerPoint presentation of visuals only, no bullet points at all. I think that can actually be better than having bullet points. PowerPoint versus Prezi. So I think Prezi is a really cool visual presentation tool. It definitely moves in a way that is a lot more engaging and interesting than PowerPoint could ever hope to be. So I guess I should say I love Prezi. And if you are familiar with Prezi and you want to use that for your presentation, you are more than welcome to use Prezi instead of PowerPoint. If you're not familiar with Prezi, don't worry, I am planning on covering that once we get to Unit 5 when we have in-class presentations. I'm going to show everybody how to use Prezi so that you can choose to use it if you want. But yeah, it's a great tool. So I'm going to hang around and make sure that there aren't any last minute lingering questions. If you're good, then you're free to sign off. I'm going to post the content again in the Unit 2 folder on Blackboard. As soon as everyone's left the meeting, I'll head over there and do that. So thank you guys for coming. I hope you found the presentation helpful, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Stay warm.